You mentioned depression. Is it something that came on the scene after the brain bleeds, or was it something that you were dealing with previously?
I wasn't dealing with it previously. My therapist thought that I might have had low-grade depression before. And at first I thought it was situational, and I'd say to people, well, I've been through a lot. It's not surprising. And as I recover, it'll get better. But it didn't. And I became suicidal a couple times. One of the times was really bad. I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I didn't want them to stop me if I actually did it or wanted to do it or whatever. And that's when I realized that I needed to go. Therapist wasn't enough, that I needed medication.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. This is episode 177 and my guest today is Deb Brandon. Deb was a mathematics professor when she experienced multiple brain bleeds at the age of 46, which turned her life upside down. Although she's at risk of more bleeds, these days, Deb sees her life as being much fuller and richer because of her stroke experience. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Deb Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Let's see. I have clusters of malformed blood vessels in my brain. They're referred to as cavernous angiomas or CCMs, cavernomas, and they're thin-walled and they can bleed. Two of mine did bleed. And the first time they did, I didn't really know what was going on, but I mentioned it to my family doctor, and she sent me for a brain MRI, and they found them. I only had fleeting symptoms, but a year later, I had acute bleeds from the same angiomas. I have quite a few of them. I don't know how many exactly. And that turned my life upside down. And I ended up having the only way to prevent future bleeds from these things is to remove them surgically. So I ended up having 3 brain surgeries. And life was interesting after that.
I love your spin on that. So how long were they in your head for before they started to play up or act up? How old were you when you first started to have problems with them?
The first time I was 46, and all hell broke loose when I was 47, but I've had them apparently since birth. They're hereditary.
Yeah, they're
My
similar to
sister
like
had, yeah,
AVMs.
go. Yes, except that, yes, they're not as vicious cousins to the AVMs. Yes,
Oh, is that right?
they bleed, but blood flow, the blood flow through them is fairly slow. I mean, they can bleed, they can cause pretty devastating symptoms, but on the other hand, they can ooze and not cause much of anything. My father has them and he's been asymptomatic all his life. My sister, on the other hand, she has them and she's 12 years younger than I am. 11 years after I had my bleed, she had hers and ended up having a brain surgery as well. So you just never
Right,
know.
right. So
And
it runs in the
as
family.
I'm sure, yeah, go ahead. What?
I was just saying, so it runs in the family totally, properly.
Yes, yes. My nephew has them. He's been asymptomatic. Um, Everyone was tested, my kids as well, and they don't seem to have them.
How has it turned your life upside down? I have a feeling that I can relate, but tell me your version.
Um, well, there are certainly symptoms that are common to most brain injury survivors, like short-term memory loss, attention span that's shortened. I didn't have any issues with paralysis. Maybe slight weakness on one side. I ended up with having seizures, tremors, vertigo, loss of balance. I still can't walk heel to toe without losing my balance. What else? Well, lots of cognitive deficits. My sequential thinking was damaged, which made it interesting for a mathematician, of course. What else? I don't know, a lot of things, but I couldn't, because of the seizures, I couldn't drive anymore. I had 2 teenagers at the time. I really, yeah, and of course, fatigue, neurofatigue, which is crippling. I don't know, a lot of stuff. It's hard.
That's plenty. That's more than enough. I can relate to all of those things, except I have more milder days these days. So I'm 10 years since my stroke. I had at 37, mine was due to an AVM. It bled 3 times, and then we had brain surgery to remove the AVM. And it was the brain surgery that made matters worse. It wasn't, the bleeds kept causing problems initially, but it was settling down. Once the bleed was under control, all the deficits were coming back. And that was the tricky part, because it was making us think that it was more benign than what it was. So it was kind of creating this sense of, oh, things are getting better, it's okay. And then after surgery, I woke up with my left side feeling numb, and I couldn't walk anymore and use my left arm. And but the benefit of the surgery is that the AVM is not there anymore, and it will never bleed again. So that's a solution.
So they don't grow back, AVMs?
No, just once again, you're born with them. They are created in utero, they're there, and they can remain benign and do nothing. But for very many of us, they bleed. They're not often in the head. Often they're in other parts of the body as well. So the ones in the head tend to be the ones that cause, obviously, a lot more problems for people.
Yeah, CCMs are mostly in the brain and the spinal cord, and they can regrow. So you remove them, they can grow back. And so there's always that fear. And also you can grow new ones. So there's always that fear that will happen again. So whenever I have a new symptom, which happens, I mean, for instance, recently I've had a lot of problems with vertigo, and immediately my thoughts are, is it another bleed? You know, that kind of thing.
Right. So they are duplicating, replicating, or just growing in new places, or?
Both. Well, the thing is, because it's due to a messed up gene, it's a mutation. For instance, X-rays can generate new ones. Now, as far as bleeds are concerned, there are all sorts of theories what can cause that, and things like high elevation, stress, things like that. But yeah, life is interesting, as I said.
Yeah. If life's interesting, I like that application of the word interesting. Does that make it better than life's shit, or life's crappy, or life's hard? Is that why you use that word?
No, not really. That's just me. To tell you the truth, now, I mean, it's been a while now. I can't think how long, but more than 10 years. That's a lot. And so I am a lot better. Except, when I'm dealing with fatigue, the symptoms get worse, but still it's a lot better than it was. And ultimately, yes, life is harder, but for me, it's better, much fuller. Um, I was a math professor. I just retired a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, and I used to teach and enjoy it. After the bloody brain, which is what I refer to it, after the bloody brain, I had losing track, which, as you know, is standard. After the bloody brain, I had to relearn things. I mean, I didn't remember the multiplication table, so I had to relearn that. I wanted to go back into the classroom, so I relearned college algebra and calculus. And after a year, I went back into the classroom. My first semester back was pretty horrible in my mind. Apparently, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but and then, but in time, I'd say by the end of that, well, by the beginning of the following year, which ends up being 2 years after the surgeries, because of having to relearn the material, and also I became more of an extrovert. I used to be very much of an introvert. Think mathematics, think socially inept mathematician. That's me. And I had to take a crash course in learning to ask for help.
Mm.
And in doing that, I realized that, hey, talking to people isn't that bad. So I became much more sociable, and I enjoyed socializing, which I didn't really before. And through that, I connected better with my students. I also, because my sequential thinking was damaged, my brain had to rewire around that. And I ended up learning to think in several different styles. So, which also helped me teach. It helped me address a variety of thinking styles. So overall, I became a much, much better teacher, and I became really passionate about teaching. So as far as I was concerned, this was a huge gain. Also, after I got back from hospital, I started writing. I had no idea what was going on. I felt like I was lost without a compass in some sort of alien landscape. And I found that I started looking everywhere for books on the internet. I wasn't looking for medical data. I mean, I had that. I wasn't looking from the caregiver point of view. I wanted to hear from brain injury survivors who are, going through a similar journey, hearing anecdotal stories. There was nothing. There really was nothing. There was one book I found by Claudia Osborne, but so I went, okay, I'll write my own book. And I figured that maybe other brain injury survivors would, maybe it would help them through my story. So I discovered writing. I never wrote before, well, as a teenager in school. But then I found that when you start hanging out with people and you see the lack of awareness, I wanted to reach a broader audience. So then I wanted to improve my writing. So I spoke to a friend of mine about it, and she suggested that I go to these workshops, and I couldn't do it because of the bloody brain. So then I ended up working with a writing coach, and it was from there on. I became a writer, and later an author. I came to really love writing. And that's another passion of mine. A day without writing, unless it's a headache day or bad brain day, a day without writing feels empty. So in many ways, the bloody brain gave me there are gains from it. First of all, the fact that I became an extrovert, and there's the writing, the teaching, and I connect better with people. I feel like the gains far outweigh the losses. And yes, life is harder, but I'm happier.
Wow.
And I like who I am better. I'm much more comfortable in my own skin.
Wow. So you're telling
So
me that as a introvert, do you not like yourself at the time? Do you know that you don't like yourself, or do you know that now because you have this other version of yourself that you can
I
compete?
know that, yeah, I know that now. I wasn't aware of, in many ways, my self-awareness really grew after the surgeries. So I was often, when I think back to things that went on, I was off in la la land half the time. As I said, think mathematician, socially inept.
Mm.
Out of it, you're busy doing your thing. The most social, mathematicians socialize, but they talk about math, basically. Through my kids, I socialized, but I found it was sort of, chit chat never did anything for me. It was all right, but in parties, I always kept to a corner somewhere, or I went into the kitchen and pretended to be busy. I just wasn't comfortable with sociable situations. But I knew I didn't like crowds, but beyond that, I don't.
Yeah.
There was a lack of awareness on my side.
Mm-hmm. So what made it so that you can become an extrovert? What was the shift? How did you gain that awareness? How did you become an extrovert? That's like a really weird and interesting thing. And I'm sure people would love to hear that insight if you have it.
Well, okay, so think about it like this. I used to be fiercely independent, and here I am needing help. And there was no question, I could not manage on my own. And the only way to get help is to ask for it. I mean, sometimes not, but in most cases, yes. And when you ask for help, you're exposing your weaknesses. And when you expose your weaknesses at some level, you are showing that you trust the person, and they reciprocate. You open up to people, they'll open up to you. They feel more comfortable. I mean, I used to be very open with my students about, if I'm teaching and I lose some words and then I have to hit the reset button, I used to go, I get tangled up in words, I get blah, 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 and then I'd be able to get back to it. At first I was really hesitant to tell my students because, you're a math professor. You shouldn't have brain problems. But then I just went, I had to. It was part of who I was. I was connecting with the students. Why would I hide this from them? And I found that the students, and one of the things I talked to them about my issues as a brain injury survivor. And it sort of evolved into talking about a lot of other issues. I was more aware of students I became more empathetic. I was more aware of problems that students were having, like mental health problems, and to help them feel more comfortable about it. I talk about mine because I forgot to mention, it's one of the things that happened from all this. You have someone rummaging around in your brain, it's bound to mess up the chemistry. And I have severe depression. I've actually been suicidal a few times. And so I was open to my students about that, and they'd come and confide in me.
Wow.
And I realized that's when I started making the connection that people who never, exposed any kind of weaknesses to me were, and I, sort of make that connection. So it was really needing help. As I said, you're fiercely independent and suddenly you have to ask for help. That's rough. And you put that effort into it and you're more aware of how things develop, I think.
And as a mathematics professor, you're also teaching, likely most of the people in the class are going to be similarly introverted to you, because mathematics tends to bring people of that nature together. Or is that a big assumption that I've just made?
No, you're right in general, but I was really lucky. I was afraid to go back to teach. I was afraid that I wouldn't be up to it. So I asked to teach the lowest level classes. Now, Carnegie Mellon is a very technical level university. I mean, it also has a drama department, but I was in the Mellon College of Science, so there were a lot of scientists there, socially inept and all that stuff. The lowest level course that we teach is calculus for humanities students. So my students were usually those who usually struggled with math. So they actually made eye contact, they actually could hold conversations, and I came to really love working with them. Now, the interesting thing is most mathematicians in my department, most of them didn't want to. For them, it was like teaching calculus in slow motion. But I was working on the process, as in I'm honing the analytical thinking skills and relating to them. And it worked. But so at one point, I was asked to teach a more advanced course, and I was scared out of my mind. But I did it, and I came away thinking I did a lousy job. I'm told that's not the case, that there were no complaints, but I still feel that I felt like I couldn't respond in real time, that my brain was working more slowly, and I know that it does. My neuropsychologist told me that my thought, and it was getting better. I mean, I even though I think more slowly than I did, I used to think really, really fast. And I think a friend of mine just yesterday said to me, well, you caught down with us, sort of thing, which is nonsense. But I found that the speed of my thinking wasn't much of an issue after a couple of years or so. But yeah, so working with the humanities kids, they're very much extroverts, and I learned a lot from them. I love teaching them. They came up with different ways of thinking about things, and I had to find new ways of addressing certain questions that I never thought of because they came so easily to me. So it was a lot of fun.
So were you an introvert as a child, and is math something that introverts do? And then as a result of the whole path towards mathematics and introversion, then do you stay that way simply because it's a mindset thing? Do you then adopt a mindset of you label yourself, I am an introvert, I am a mathematician, I don't talk to people, I don't do. Is it just these stories that you're telling yourself that ends you up 40 years later in a situation where you're uncomfortable with yourself and the way that you're interacting with people, and you're not aware of it because you've never given yourself the opportunity to try new things? Does that resonate?
That's an interesting question. I was painfully shy as a kid. Well, okay, so there's an interesting side to it. The angiomas that bled on the right-hand side. So one theory is that the left side was compensating for whatever and overdeveloped. I don't know if that's true. My biologist cousin says, the brain is squishy, probably doesn't make that much of a difference. But you do wonder. As I said, I was painfully shy. I did not like being with more than 2-3 people at a time. I did, when I was a young adult, I did try and force myself, but it was tough. I think it's I'm not sure what the reason is, but it is a bit of a mindset. I mean, I had to teach computer science kids, and they're worse than mathematicians. I mean, they're in the sense that socially they can't look you in the eye and that kind of thing. That's another kind of mindset. It is a mindset, but I was surrounded by this mindset.
So
my father,
normal. It appeared normal. This is how people behave or interact, or this is what people normally do.
yeah, my father was in academia, so I grew up amongst academics. That's what I knew, academics. First through my father, and then through my own work. So I think it is a mindset. What changed with the bloody brain was, I think it happened organically. I don't think there was no decision involved. I don't know.
It emerged.
Yeah.
Interesting when this space, I describe a lot of the things that happened to me, that my brain completely had to switch off and my heart came online. And because my head switched off, my heart had space to just be itself. And then I started to like what I was seeing and how I was interacting and what people saw. Yeah, right. And then I was like, that's interesting. I love how that person responded to me. Okay, what do I have to do to get that response at home? At home, I was being an angry dad, 37 years old, all the pressures of the world, mortgaged, entrepreneurial kind of style, running my life, no real focus on health, being happy and doing things that please me, just work. And it was like, now I can't work. I've got time on my hands. Now I can't have any excuses for all the things that are going on. Basically, it was all me. And now this new me can't do those things because it was physically impossible to do my life the way I was doing it before. But my brain was also not working. So at one point I couldn't finish sentences. I didn't remember who had come to visit me. I couldn't type an email. I couldn't drive. I had fatigue, serious fatigue. I couldn't go from the bedroom to the bathroom and then be able to be active. I was gone for the rest of the afternoon. So the only thing that remained was my ability to experience other people. And I had some regrets. I thought that if I did die, what would my children think of me? And that I wasn't a terrible person, but I behaved inappropriately too often. And I wanted to address that, and I wanted to make sure that they knew that that wasn't really me, that was my behavior. It wasn't an excuse that I was making, but I put time into remedying the things that I knew were inappropriate at the time, but I did them anyway and made excuses as to why I was doing it. So with my head offline, I never had to overthink anything because I couldn't overthink anymore.
Right.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So I had this increase in emotional intelligence. Would you say that you experienced an emotional intelligence upgrade?
Oh, very much so. No question about that. And I don't know. And, okay, so my explanation was now there's room in my brain once they took out the bleeders. But it's a good way of thinking about it in terms of heart versus mind. Yeah, definitely my emotional intelligence grew. I think part of it is also the writing, because I was trying to understand what was going on so that I became more self-aware and I reflected a lot on what was going on. I think before the brain bleeds, I thought I was happy. I did stuff with my kids. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed life, but it's at a different level now. It's not just at a different level, it's on a different plane. It's in a very different way. I tend to throw myself into things more. There's much more passion in what I do.
The people who you hung around with, who were your friends before all of the bleeding, did they remain your friends? And how did they find you, this different version of Deb? What was their experience like?
Well, the interesting thing about that is that I was thinking about that not long ago. The friends from most of the people who are now friends weren't really friends of mine before. I mean, I knew them maybe or not. The people who were friends, well, first of all, people that I considered as friends, when I think back to how we interacted, I think of them as acquaintances now. So the only ones where I have a connection with from the past are my elementary school friends. One of the things, when I wanted to understand what was going on, I started looking back to who I used to be. And I reconnected with people through social media. And I ended up talking to friends from way back when. And now it started up a thing where we get together every so often. I mean, it's through Zoom and in person a few times, through Zoom a few times. And they're friends. I consider them friends. I think they consider me as friends. But that's elementary school. That's pre-everything, pre-bratty teenager, all that kind of stuff. The ones that were more recent, I lost touch with them. As I said, they were more acquaintances. I didn't really have a connection with them. And the connection that I did have, which was tenuous at best, didn't really hold out. I mean, for instance, one of my colleagues, really nice guy, we connected actually through Englishness. He was from England and all that. As I said, we were acquaintances. His wife I sort of knew. After the brain surgeries, I connected with her more. I found that the people around me in the sciences didn't quite know how to, well, certainly didn't understand, and they didn't have the tools to understand, is my feeling. I don't think they had that empathy. And we're back to socially inert, you don't have that ability. So I ended up connecting more with, I'm a weaver, so I connected more to the weaving community. I was a dragon boater, so I connected more with the dragon boating community, not science.
Yeah.
So,
I love what you said just then about they didn't have the tools to understand and appreciate. And that is such a lovely way to spin that issue that we face, which I faced, which was that certain friends had no idea what to do. And at times I may have got upset with them and annoyed with them. But it was short-lived. I didn't take it to heart that they didn't know how to respond or react or behave after I had had 3 bleeds and brain surgery and couldn't walk anymore. But your version of it is beautiful, because then not having the tools is not about them. It's just that they actually don't have the tools to respond in a way that is going to make me feel better about my interaction with them. And and it's almost also that, nor should they. I mean, they've never been through something as serious as we have, and we don't want them to go through something like that. And they haven't had to use those skills before, because perhaps they haven't known anybody that's been so unwell before. So, you can kind of give them a little bit of slack, and it doesn't matter whether they stop being so prolific in your circles or stop being around so often. It doesn't matter. It just matters that we don't take it personally when people don't know how to respond around us. Because I certainly found that. And then I found other friends who I thought were completely emotionless. I found them are the ones that stepped up and came forward and did things I never expected, because they were just playing a emotionless game. They were pretending to be emotionless. And then when it came down to the crunch, they really were able to step up. So it was kind of more of a bravado thing that we were doing, male bravado, and interacting like, like we never had feelings or anything like that. But these people stepped forward and actually surprised the heck out of me. And they find it difficult to admit that they've done an amazing thing for me. They really find it difficult when I say to them, look, you stepped up and you've changed my life in one way, in a certain way that really helped when it was necessary. Like, it really made a huge difference to my life. They find it really difficult to have that conversation. So I'm not sure what that's about, but that's my experience. Is people dropped off, and then the people that were on the periphery came on seriously, and it was just stunning.
The interesting thing was family. They all cared, they all worried, but most of them didn't really understand. And a lot of them, I got the impression, felt that after 3 months you should be fine, right? And with me, it's more, unlike you with not being able to walk, with me, it's more invisible. My disabilities are much more, my balance, unless I try to walk heel to toe, or if I'm really, really tired, you wouldn't know that I have balance problems. And also we're very good at hiding things, lean nonchalantly against the wall, that kind of thing. But after the worst of it, after the early days, that's when you start seeing the reaction of, well, you should be over it by now. And I introduced my mother to the term sensory overload because I have huge issues with it. And there was one time where I went to visit them, and my mother was going on and on and on at me about something, and I just couldn't deal with it. I just left because I didn't want to snap at her. And then I came back and apologized and explained. And she said, well, I have sensory overload too. So I said, oh, does it bring you to the point where you're having a meltdown? And she said, well, I feel like crying. I'm thinking, okay, we don't quite get it, do we? Or I tell her I'm really tired, and she'd go, you were always a napper. So my mother was there for me during the surgeries and all that. But after the fact, I don't know what it was. She likes being the center of attention. So maybe that's what it was. There was a level there of some tension that wasn't really there before. On the other hand, my sister, who went through something similar, we're very, very close now. I mean, we were always close, but the connection became much, much stronger.
Yeah. Well, you guys completely understand each other. You guys both totally know what sensory overload means. You both totally know what fatigue means. And you guys can relate to each other like never before. You completely understand each other.
Yeah.
And the people who you described it so lovely, like when somebody is used to being the center of attention, and previously Deb is definitely not the center of attention. She's the introvert who tries to not have any attention. Then that person who has been the center of attention can just experience all the attention that their heart desires. And now there's somebody else competing for that attention. That makes sense that they would feel uncomfortable about that. And of course, we both know that that says more about them than it says about you. And we can kind of, from that, we can conclude that it's a time for growth and adjustment for that person as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully they know it.
Yeah. Actually, what you with the growth thing, with the growth issue, one thing that you've talked about, not that I experienced enormous personal growth. And that's another thing that I can't say that I regret what happened. I don't want to repeat it. But I'm not unhappy that it happened, because it brought me so much and it made me who I am now. And I like myself a lot better than who I was before.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have the same experience. I feel that I like myself better. I'm more aware of doing things that are not appropriate, that I don't like. I stop them sooner. I apologize quicker. And that's just one aspect of my life. That's just one thing that's enhanced. Like you, I've sat to write a book about this experience. And my book is a book about post-traumatic growth. That's what it's about. Everyone talks about post-traumatic stress, but I'm going to try and highlight the post-traumatic growth aspect of it. Glass half full kind of guy. And that's been the hardest thing for me to do, because I was never somebody who read books. I was never somebody who wrote books. I never could identify as that kind of person. I could never relate to writers and book readers. And I just thought it was something that, that the nerds did, which is something that I picked up when I was in school, when I was probably, 13 or 14 years old. And now I'm like you, I want to write and I can't write quick enough. I can't write often enough. There's never enough time for me to write now. And it's always on my mind when I'm not writing. I'm always thinking, oh, I would love to be writing now. Wow, wouldn't it be good to put that chapter together now and finish that? And I just It's the project that's going to take the longest that I've ever done. And I've never done long projects because you don't do that. I don't do long projects. It's too boring.
Okay, couple things about that. One is an interesting thing about what you're writing. I'm currently working on a sequel to my memoir about recovery of brain injury, and it's more or less about living with brain injury. And it's basically about how it changed my perspective of the world. So it's, like you said, growth, post-traumatic growth. And it's I find it really interesting. That's a nice way of putting it. I find myself writing about things I never thought of before, like unlike a lot of brain injury survivors or any kind of ordeal survivors, I didn't get religion. But my relationship towards religion changed. And so I wrote about that. I wrote about who I am now versus who I was before. You know, I don't know if you've read the book Head Cases by Michael Paul Mason.
No.
He's a case manager, and he writes these short stories. He wrote these short stories. He was a journalist too, about various cases that he worked on. One of the things he said that the question of identity, how has my identity changed, is very common amongst brain injury survivors. And that's something, so I wanted to try and understand what had changed in me, what's mind, what's brain, what's me, what's soul, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So I wrote about that. I wrote about appreciating nature more, about, because one thing with sensory overload, it brings everything, every piece of data comes in with the same value, which means that you can't differentiate between a whisper and a loud, whatever, yell sort of thing. Everything comes in. But on the other hand, the other side, the flip side of that is that you are aware of details that you didn't even notice before. So hence, you notice, you see beauty in things that you didn't even see before. So there's a lot of stuff that has changed dramatically for me, and I've been writing about that. I think I'm getting close to the final draft now, the final full draft now. So hopefully, anyway, because I'm ready for it to come to fruition. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is writing, not having time for writing. I can't do, the only way I can do big projects is in chunks, because attention span, fatigue, all that. So I do it in chunks, and sometimes the chunks are 5 minutes, 15 minutes. I can't work more than an hour and a half at a time. After an hour and a half, chances are I'll get really bad headaches the next day or something. Working full time, I was rough, was really tough. And when I retired, I took early retirement because I just couldn't do it anymore. When I retired, I started being able to write more, but still I was limited. The last 2 years before I retired, I reached a point at work where even writing was tough for me, just doing anything extra. So to get back into it, what I did was I started writing 15 minutes a day. Give me a writing prompt, I'll write about it for 15 minutes, whether it's a photo that you see or a poem that you read, or you just see something. And that got me back into it, got me back into the passion of writing. Now, I've always been a voracious reader, Unfortunately, because of my short-term memory issues and my short attention span, I couldn't read. I mean, I could read the words, but I couldn't string them together into a sentence. That got better, but then again, because of being overwhelmed by too much, I couldn't read dense books. I could read children's books where the type was large and the words were sparse, but I couldn't read books I wanted to read. And then I discovered the e-reader, Kindle or whatever, where you can control that, and I became a voracious reader again.
Okay. I like the sound of that. See, I've never thought of that, because I was given a book to read while I was in hospital. It was the worst thing that I could have been given. But of course, I didn't say that at the time. It was a lovely gesture, but there was no chance I was going to read. And I gave that book back unread many years later, 7 years later. So I get what you're saying, and still I struggle to read. If I've had a big day, because I still have my property maintenance business that has been operating since 2005. So if I have a busy day doing that stuff, then I don't have enough capacity to come home later and look at a monitor. So I like to wake up early, and when I wake up early, and if all the stars have aligned and all the planets are aligned, I just come into my space here, and I sit down and I start writing, and I might get an hour or two into it, and then I'm done. And I might be done, like you said, for a couple of days or whatever. And then that challenges me and frustrates me, and that's kind of where the learning is coming from, because I'm so passionate about getting the project finished, but I have way more obstacles in front of me than I ever had. And when I never had any obstacles in front of me, I never gave it a second thought that I was going to write anything. I never considered it at all. So now, yesterday, I had a massive migraine, and it didn't start off in the morning. It started off about 11:30. I started to notice it, but I did sit down from between 7 a.m. and about 9:30 a.m. and I did put together a few additional pages of words, and then I was kind of feeling, what's the word, like, it's not enough that I have a migraine and that I have to deal with. That didn't end up being so dramatic, but it was a pretty decent one. Kind of leveled off quite quickly for some reason. It's not only that I was dealing with that, I was also dealing with myself going, man, you should be writing. You should be writing. Why aren't you writing? I can't write. I've got a migraine. But I really want to be writing. Like I'm having this internal dialogue of, just go and lie down and don't worry about it and move on, and we'll get there at some stage. But I've never had that fear of missing out so much. I feel like I'm missing out when I'm not writing it, or if you don't complete this, Bill, I tell you, you're going to hate yourself. And it's like, no, I will complete it. I will complete it.
Okay. We've got to do something about this. Okay.
It's nutty.
One thing, there's something called conditions of enoughness, that you set yourself what you're going to do today, and it's got to be doable. I mean, and not in the sense of you're going to finish a chapter, but you'll write a page. Or with someone who has major depression issues, get up and brush your teeth, this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, did you do it? Are you happy with what you did, sort of thing? So it shouldn't be, you've got to be more realistic with this. I mean, you have to. And this is something, when I retired, I thought, I'll be able to write 4 hours a day and this, that, and the other. It was tough. I was in really bad shape emotionally for a good year and a half, until I realized that I've got to change my mindset with that it's okay what I do. And if there are days when I don't write, it's okay. So yeah, that's a tough one, but I don't. And one thing that I do is that every evening I actually set the alarm for this. What did I do today? And if I didn't do anything, I don't think of it in terms of I didn't do anything. I said, I rested. I needed to rest.
Nice.
And that's really helped me. And for instance, yesterday, I had a meeting with someone, and then I wrote for 15 minutes. And I said, wow, I even wrote. So I was really happy. But, so it's really helped me with handling that. Just asking yourself at the end of the day, what did you do and what did it do for you?
Yeah, that's lovely.
So
I often do plenty, and it all does something positive for me. It's very rare that I don't do anything because I'm being lazy. It's not because I'm being lazy. It is because I'm resting, and I need to rest my brain. And I definitely need to. If I don't rest my brain, then my body suffers, and then the loop starts, and then it's and then it goes too long. I've started to learn where my limits are so that I can be at exhaustion for the smallest amount of time.
Right.
Okay, I'm at exhaustion now. I get it. Okay, rest. And I don't do those loops that I was doing about the book and not writing. I don't do it about anything else. I'm just doing about this writing project. It is so important to me. It is so fantastic. People have stepped up to help out, etc. I owe that to everybody who has decided to be a part of it in some way, and I owe it to myself. And it's going to happen, but I'm impatient. That's what it is. I'm impatient for it to see it, done.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I've had to learn patience, and believe me, it doesn't always work. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't actually something that I was whining to a friend of mine about. If, before the brain injury, I could have written for 4 hours. And he said, before the brain injury, you weren't writing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I had that regret too. I remember getting up in front of a room many years ago. It was probably a year into the second bleed, not even a year into the first kind of stage of my life altering sort of brain bleeds. And I got up and I said, look, I used to take my brain for granted, and I never really paid attention to what I could and can't do, and therefore I haven't done a lot of things that I should have done. And I don't know if I'll ever get it back again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get it back again. And I haven't got it back the same way it was before, because before I never experienced neurological fatigue and sensory overload and all the challenges we've spoken about that are common to stroke survivors and brain injury survivors. And I wasn't writing, but I felt like if I can't write because of this, or I can't do certain things because of this, I'm going to be such an idiot, because I had the opportunity. I had a perfectly good brain back then. I'm going to be such an idiot for not making the most of it back then. But I got over that after a while, but it was definitely something that played on my mind.
No, I didn't. I learned very quickly not to, well, I should maybe not very quickly. I learned that the old Deb was the old Deb and the new Deb is the new Deb, that to compare. Every so often, yes, I could have worked for 4 hours at a time, but I mean, I used to have focus used to be, I used to have no trouble at all focusing on something. Now I do. I used to, whenever I started something, I always finished it. It was almost like I was, OCD about it. Now, if I started washing dishes, I always finished it. Now I can't. So I stop. Not a big deal. Anything like that. And I had to learn that it's okay not to finish things. And sometimes you never get to finish them. Do you have issues with task initiation? Getting started. What?
Getting started?
Yeah.
I do.
You want to do something, and yeah. I mean, that's something that I originally thought was procrastination, but my neuropsychologist told me that it's very different, and it feels completely different. I mean, you
I,
just can't do it. I mean,
I
things I
have
really wanted to do and I can't do it.
I have it at the end of the day, and also sometimes. So the whole thing that I'm doing online, the Recovery After Stroke project, that's an ongoing project that started in 2015, and it's nowhere near where I want it to be. But and there's a lot of reasons for this, because I'm learning about how to behave online, what to do online, what to offer. So I'm doing what I can, and when I can, and when I'm feeling up to it. I'm a stroke survivor after all, so I have to deal with all the other challenges as well. And I have this other job that is the job that keeps the family going and brings in an income and pays the bills and all that kind of thing. So it's a passion project. But according to the social media experts, you have to be posting a certain amount of time, and you have to be doing all these things on a regular basis. And it's true, because the algorithm likes it when I'm providing certain bits of information on a regular basis that's predictable, that people can consume, and therefore it suits the social media algorithm to show my posts more often. But if I come home and I've had a big day, and then I'm either experiencing fatigue or sensory overload or whatever, that task that must be done today will not get done today under any circumstances. And it's not that I haven't got the desire or I don't know the benefit of doing it. It's that it just physically cannot get done. My brain cannot compute what it needs to do to start the task and then finish it. So I find myself having these fleeting moments. Yesterday, I was driving home from a chiropractic appointment, and the next post for my Instagram page came up in my head, and I knew what it was, and I knew that I had the energy to do it. So I stopped the car, I parked, I wrote the post, and I posted it. It wasn't when I was meant to do it. It wasn't the normal way for me to do those things, but I just did it. And if I had forgotten about it, and said I'll do it later might have been 2 days later.
No, I sometimes the later is a year later, even more. I wanted to get back in touch with my cousin, and it took me 10 years. And it was too late by then. His feelings were hurt, blah, blah, blah. And I apologized, but there was nothing I could do about it. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's as though there's a disconnect there, as though it's almost a tangible something blocking you from starting it. And very often I have trouble starting something, but when I do get started, then it's as though I never had a problem. It's really odd. And other times I have trouble starting something, and out of the blue, I get started on it. It's really strange. And I talked to my neuropsychologist about it. He said, yeah, that's the way it is. And that's something that people automatically assume is procrastination. I've had students with that problem, had brain injuries and had problem. They said, oh yeah, I procrastinate a lot more than I used to, and I correct them. And it helps knowing what it is. It really does.
I have exactly what you said, the same experience with my godparents. So for me, when we grew up, my parents and my godparents were really close. And I really, really loved my godparents. I had a great connection with them. And then about 20 years ago, they had a separation where they stopped interacting with each other so much. And that meant that I was in my 20s then, and that meant that naturally, because they stopped interacting, my interaction levels went down, because as a 20-year-old, I wasn't really interested in hanging around with any oldies at all. So it wasn't personal, it was just timing. And however, I would make an effort to go and see my godparents probably once every 18 months or 2 years or something. Just drop in, say hello, have a cup of tea. And that lasted for the majority of the time until I got sick. And then at 37, after let's say another 10 years of from my mid-20s, say about 12 years of me just popping in and seeing them. Of course, when you're dealing with a brain injury, it took me 6 or 7 years to feel like I'm back to my, I'm going to use the term old self, but it wasn't my old self, my new version of me. And I hadn't been to visit them for 6 or 7 years. And they took it personally. They thought that it was me that was stopping to come and see because they did something and they upset me. And I was like, no, you didn't do anything that upset me. I was recovering. And I always wanted to come and see you, but I just couldn't. And it's not because I didn't want to. I just couldn't. And that's what you just described right now. That's exactly what it was. I had them on my mind, and I would say to myself, I'm going to go visit them next month, next week, next year. And that it would just go by and I wouldn't get there. And then it happened when I went, I had it on my mind, and then I found out that my godfather was unwell and he had a tumor in his brain, and it was close to the last days of his life. And that's when I made it back there.
Yeah.
But when I got there, he was not able to recognize me. He didn't know who I was and what was happening. And my godmother apologized because she thought that he had upset me 5 or whatever years earlier. And I said, well, no, like, I wasn't upset. I just was sick. I was unwell, and I had other reasons why I couldn't get in. That wasn't it. So that's the exact same thing that you just said. And I never thought about it as this, how you described it, this inability to start, or how did you describe it?
Task initiation, that's what my neuropsychologist referred to it. No, it's a bona fide symptom. It is. And it can happen with anything. It can be with the book that you really want to read. It could be, it hits out of the blue. One thing my neuropsychologist suggested, he said, you do a daily task list, and it's not a to-do list. It has no more than 2 tasks on it, tasks that you've had problems starting. And you block off time on your calendar. You're going to spend, here's an hour during which you'll do this task, and here's an hour and a half during which you'll do that task. And if you do more than that, great. If you complete them. So it's like the conditions of enoughness type thing. The only problem is there was one time I did the first task, and I couldn't do the second. I was too tired. So I'm lying in bed and I'm going, oh, I didn't do the second task. I've got to do it because I have to do it. It's on my list. Just too tired, and then I go on and on and on and on. And finally I go, oh, I could put it on my list tomorrow. So when I mentioned it to my neuropsychologist, he said, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that. But also the other problem with it is it's self-defeating, because you have to write down the task list. What if you can't start writing down the task list? And it can't be more than 2. He told me, don't put more than 2 items on it. And he told me why. He said, more than 2, you won't do anything. And I thought, yeah, right. Put 3 on. Couldn't do any of them. It's too much.
Yeah, I can.
And it could be, as I said, it could be. And the other problem with it is identifying what it is that you can't do, because when you know you have to do something, you have to do it. You will do it. I mean, it. It's not like procrastination where you'll eventually get to it. You are going to do it, just not right now.
Yeah.
So you don't, it takes a long time. Well, now that I've identified that I have trouble identifying it, it doesn't take me as long, but it sometimes it took me a long time to really figure out that this was something that I needed to put on my task list. So it doesn't always work, but it can.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a good strategy. It's worth having in the toolbox.
Yeah.
You mentioned depression. Is it something that came on the scene after the brain bleeds, or was it something that you were dealing with previously?
I wasn't dealing with it previously. My therapist thought that I might have had low-grade depression before. And at first I thought it was situational, and I'd say to people, well, I've been through a lot. It's not surprising. And as I recover, it'll get better. But it didn't. And I became suicidal a couple times. One of the times was really bad. I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I didn't want them to stop me if I actually did it or wanted to do it or whatever. And that's when I realized that I needed to go, that a therapist wasn't enough, that I needed medication. And even then, something that a lot of people with depression do is they feel better and they say, oh, I don't need their medication anymore, or I can cut back. So I've done that a couple of times. Don't do that anymore. And the suicide ideation came back. So yeah, this is definitely from someone rummaging around in my brain.
And yet life is fuller.
Oh yeah. And I'm more content.
Mm.
Isn't that odd?
That's amazingly odd. Yeah. Fabulously odd. I like it. I mean, that's kind of, to me, it's like she's telling me her life is full and she has depression. People who normally have depression don't have a fuller life. They appears to be a different version of how they experience depression. You've seen it as something that can be managed and handled, and therefore medication helps you live the fuller version of your life.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. I mean, that's amazing. That's completely different to what I've ever heard of other people saying. But yeah, that's just really interesting. I really like that version of it. And I don't like it that you have depression, but I like that version of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I can't explain it. It's just the way it is. I mean, I'm one of these people. I don't take myself very seriously, which helps a lot. I laugh at myself quite a bit. So, for instance, with the short-term memory issues, and some of them are long-term issues, I find them hilarious most of the time. Well, the funniest one was this was 2 days after I got back from my third surgery. I went over next door to talk to my next door neighbor, one of my friends, and she had a guest over, and the three of us were sitting around the dining room table, and the neighbors, starts talking about a movie she just seen. She said, "Oh, it's really good. You should go see it. It's it's the one, it just came out." And the other woman goes, "Yeah, I know which one you mean. It's the one with the Now I have no clue. I'd been out of commission for a good while, but I'd seen a video last night that was really good. And I said, I don't know which movie you think you're talking about, but I saw this great video. It's it's new. It's the one with the actor, the one with the hair, and it." Okay, so I'm the brain injury survivor who just come home from brain surgery. The next door neighbor was chemo brain, and the other one was going through menopause. And we just started roaring with laughter. So I find it amusing more than anything else. I mean, there are times, I missed a couple of important meetings, and one was not a good outcome, but I just went, not much I can do about it. Another one, I I explained it laughing, and they went, "Oh, geez, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's okay. We can reschedule." But most of the time, I find these things hilarious. I mean, it's like, as I said, leaning nonchalantly against the wall when you when you look like a drunk, you know.
Mm-hmm. I was out yesterday. We mentioned it earlier a little bit. I was out yesterday, and we just, it's really hot in Melbourne at the moment. So I don't drink, but beer goes down well when it's really hot. And I had a beer,
Mhm.
and the people I was with said to me, "You look like really tired and really wrecked." I said, I am really tired and really wrecked. And I can't hide it anymore. Where before you could hide it. I look at myself in the mirror some days and I think, dude, you look extremely tired. But what can I do? That's just the way it is. And I have to go about my day like that. And I have these really kind of droopy puppy dog eyes, so they look like I'm half asleep normally, and then
Mhm.
add a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of heat, and
Mhm.
some alcohol, which I very rarely do with the alcohol, but add that, and then the droopy, it almost looks like I'm sleeping on the table, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm trying
Yeah.
to, and if I miss out on that opportunity to be out with my friends, because of COVID and all the stuff we've been through, I really won't like that. So I made an effort to make sure that I went out knowing that I'm not feeling the best, but I knew that it wasn't going to impact me in the next day or the day after. I knew that I had done just enough so that I don't miss out, but also not too much so that I pay the price tomorrow. So that's really interesting. And yeah, I don't know enough people around me who are near me that are that can relate to me. That's the reason for the
Mhm.
podcast and for the stuff
Mhm.
I'm doing. It's I get to interact with people from all around the world
Yeah.
who get me and know me. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm still navigating a lot of the expectations that people have about my own recovery from their point of view, and it's like, no, we don't talk about me anymore, but I do explain why I can't do what we used to do, or I'm not going down there, or I'm not attending that event or whatever. I explain to them it's because of the fatigue, or it's because of the sensory overload, or it's because of something related to what happened to me 10 years ago. But we kind of have stopped talking about how are you doing, how's your health, that has stopped. Do you
Mhm.
still have those conversations with people about, when they make it about you, are you okay? Do they do that still?
People who know will ask me how I'm doing. I mean, for instance, I'm still in touch with some of my students, and they'll ask, "Well, how are you doing? How things going? Is this still affecting you?" That kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, one of the things, yeah. So it's really only people who know. If I also, in terms of explaining it, I've learned to gauge how much they really want to know,
Yeah.
because you know how they get that glazed look in their eyes.
Yeah.
So, you say, "Well, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine," because I know that the eyes are going to glaze over. And otherwise I'll say, "Well, doing okay, you never quite recover from blah, 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 blah." Um, so you learn to gauge it. You learn to who is really interested and who isn't. With new people, if I have trouble with something, like for instance, if I have to cancel something at the last minute, I explain, and either they understand or they don't. There's
Yeah.
not much I can do about it. I, I I used to really worry about people understanding or not understanding, and now I just don't anymore.
Mm.
One project I'm working on is I'm working with a friend of mine who's a caregiver to a brain injury survivor, and we're co-writing a book based on conversations between us, on the parallel journeys of caregivers and survivors. And I'm learning a lot from her, because things that I didn't even realize. And the thing that's amazing is, even with survivors, there's a lot we don't know, a lot we're not aware as a bona fide symptom, or a lot, things like we don't know how to cope with something. And you learn a lot from each other. We learn a lot from each other. And I find that lost my train of thought there.
The caregiver's perspective you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. So I learned a lot from her about how it looks on the outside, and a lot of stuff that I really wasn't aware of. Someone took a photo of me when I was, during a seizure. It was one where I lost muscle tone and whatnot. And I suddenly realized from seeing the photo, I thought, my God, no wonder people really worry when I see.
Uh-huh.
But so you really, there's a lot you don't realize what you're projecting.
Yes.
I mean, you'll talk about the fatigue. Somebody, a friend of mine said to me, "Oh, it sounds like you're really tired." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And then I happened to catch a reflection of myself, and boy, did I look tired. I have no idea. It's like you said, the eyes are drooping and all that kind of stuff. But okay, lost it again.
Yeah, that's all right. That was me yesterday. That tiredness, that look of tiredness that I'm projecting, was terrifying, and but not uncommon for me now. So they kind of see it and they know where I'm at, and they'll even say, like, "Is it time to go?" And I'll have the final call on that. "Oh, I'm having too much fun. Let's stay," or "Yeah, I'm completely wrecked. Let's go." So, I do project tiredness, and then people see that, and then they have to somehow know how to respond or react to that.
Do you sometimes reach a point where there's a point of no return with a sensory overload, where you can't escape because you're having fun, but it's too much, but you want to stay, but you need to go, and you reach a point where you can't physically go?
I'm usually not alone. So if I'm at an event that I'm going to experience sensitive, I'm with my wife, and I'll say,
"Yeah,
I think it's time to go."
Yes, but other times when, so I've been in situations where I know, but my dysfunction has reached a point where I can't communicate, I can't move.
No.
And sometimes I have meltdowns, and I'm usually with people who know, and I usually warn people in advance that something like this might happen. This is what to watch out for. But people aren't always in tune. And I've been stuck in situations, and eventually I can get out of it myself, but can take a long, long time. I mean, when I go shopping, supermarket, I often get sensory overload, and I end up freezing because I couldn't get out of there, and I just stand there. But I've learned that I can only manage 2 aisles at a time. I can't do more than that. But there's one problem, is the milk aisle is always in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So buying milk, now go in and go, milk. I've got to get milk. And sometimes it's enough, sometimes it isn't. So getting milk is still an issue. I have a friend who usually gets me milk because I have problems getting milk.
Yeah. Wow. No, I've never had that experience of sensory overload to that extent. I am usually so fatigued and exhausted. It's just like, we have to go right now. So maybe I've missed that next level. the window of opportunity to go is right now.
Right.
I've got to go. That's
Right.
it. And it's like,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
wife's like, oh, yeah, sorry, I'm stuffed. I got to go now. So
Yeah.
that's all. That's kind of as far as it got for me. But I do have days where I haven't done much and I'm just around the house and I'm feeling like all I can do is just go and lie down on the bed, close the doors, close the windows, close the shutters, and make it as dark and as quiet as possible. Sometimes I even put headphones on, those noise cancelling ones
Yeah.
that are not on. They're just on my head, switched off,
Yeah.
just so that things stop
Right.
interfering, and that really helps. And that goes back to educating me and giving me an insight into what people on the autistic spectrum experience and suffer, because I could never understand what they were going through and what was happening for them. But now I do.
Right.
Now I know. And I appreciate so much the quiet. I just love the quiet, to put these things on and things go quiet. It's such a beautiful experience to go through. And that recharges me. That might give me an hour or two and then recharges.
Yeah. Life is good. It really is.
It is. Like you, I feel like this has enhanced my life. It's tough every day to be me. My left side is always reminding me that I've been through this. Neurofatigue, lack of concentration, all these issues that we've spoken about are there every day. They weren't there before, and because they're there, I've learned where to go. I've found these deeper places where I can go to deal with my emotional response to those situations. So I have a broader level of ways to respond to things, and it's not just the freak out and act like an idiot anymore. I can communicate what's going on to me. I can apologize for when I'm being an idiot, and then also have these new understanding of, okay, I don't need to push through. I can stop. I can take a breather. So everything that we've spoken about has come to me dramatically after the first bleed. It's come to me, and it's helped me have this, what do we call it, like additional perspective. I'm not sure if that's the word. I think it's perspective, and therefore I realize how shallow I was as a person before that. And it wasn't my fault, but that's kind of what I was. I was shallow, and now I have depth and layers and different directions, and that's far better.
There's another one. Oh God, I lost it again. Actually putting it in terms of shallow, that really resonates. I think that's very true of me. In terms of empathy towards other people, one thing that I learned that I find fascinating is if you look at any kind of neurological disorder, we experience similar symptoms. I mean, for instance, if you look at people with autism, the sensory overload. I mean, I found myself one day doing this and I'm going, oh my God, I'm autistic. And then I realized what it was. It's that the repetitive stuff, it calms you down. It really does. With bipolar disorder, people who have bipolar disorder, they also have short-term memory issues. Depression, in terms of, I talked about the task initiation stuff. People with depression, that's a big thing. And I actually, a couple of my students, I told them about the task list thing. There's so much overlap. It's amazing. I mean, things that you never thought of before. one of my nephews, there's no label on what he has, but a lot of his issues, I get it because I experienced them too. I mean, for instance, he has issues of sensory overload, and he was, I don't know, 6 years old, and he'd have these huge meltdowns. And we had some sort of family reunion, and I was observing him, and I said, I think this is what's going on. And suddenly there was this huge aha thing, and they knew what to do. So really it makes you much more empathetic towards such a broad range of issues that people have.
Yeah. And I also had that other understanding of when I was in a wheelchair and couldn't walk, I had the understanding of, oh my God, like people in wheelchairs aren't just sitting down. And therefore everything's okay in their world. Like there's so much going on that means that they have to be in a wheelchair. And it's like, you were such an idiot. You only ever thought that they were just didn't have use of their legs, and that was the only issue. Oh my gosh. Like, it's such a narrow-minded view of the world. And again, I wasn't being hard on myself. I had a massive awareness. It's like, so I can't walk, but it's only one side of me that can't walk. The other side can. All right, I'm emotionally annoyed and distressed about that. Oh, okay, that's another thing that's happening to me. Oh, I can't get to the toilet. Oh, that's another thing that's happening to me that I've got to deal with. Oh, like I can't feel my left side, but I can feel my right side. Oh, okay, that's another thing that's happening. And it's like, every person who's in a bloody wheelchair is there for a completely different or similar reason or whatever. And it's not the fact that they can't use their legs. That's the only issue. Grow a brain. Like, I appreciate these things for more than what they just appear to be. And that's a good part, because I can see somebody in a wheelchair now and interact with them where before I didn't know how to, couldn't. And that's so silly not to know how to interact.
When you see the person, see the person where we didn't before. I mean, we were attached to the labels, and you didn't see the person behind the labels. Oh, there's a handicapped person in a wheelchair, but he's a person.
Yeah, that's it.
There's stuff going on in his life. No, it's huge. And you sort of, my daughter's a recovering drug addict, and she went through 12-step program and things like that. And I was talking to her friends, and we were saying, she sent me a copy of Narcotics Anonymous because she thought I'd be interested, and I was interested in the 12 steps and all that. And we were talking about how a lot of people would benefit from. So I always tell my students, I've got a baseball bat in my office. If you want me to hit you over the head, feel free to ask me, because there are benefits to it. But I mean, this is another interesting thing. So you talk to recovering addicts, and you find that you've got stuff in common with them too. It's really amazing. There's a big world out there with a lot of really good stuff, a lot of bad stuff, but it's really fascinating.
And if you look at what makes us similar, or where we're the same, or what brings us together, there's way more of that stuff. It's our differences are so little. Which political party you vote for, and that kind of stuff. They're so minor. I mean, the things that actually bring us together, there's so much more of those. That's what I've found. And it's not about the political party that you vote for, and it's not about what you think about vaccination, and it's not about any of that stuff. It's just that's kind of the very irrelevant stuff. It's that I think that's the stuff that distract people from the actual seeing the person. That's
One
how I
of
can,
the Another book that I wrote was about textile techniques from around the world. And at first I wrote it because I'm fascinated by, as a weaver, as a maker myself, I was interested in the techniques. But as I grew as a writer, I realized the importance of stories, and telling the stories, you see the person. I mean, you can label, you can say, okay, there's a Guatemalan weaver there who makes beautiful textiles. Well, what does that tell you? Well, I don't know her from, and so I'm writing the stories and bringing these people to you. Look, they're people like you. So there's the labels are, and they're good as a starting point to help you recognize something, like she's got gray hair and glasses. But when you go beyond the labels, you have to go beyond the labels to see the person. And the strength, the power in stories is, as human beings, that's exactly what helps us, prevents us from losing our humanity, is the stories behind them. And if you look at that with textile traditions, it's interesting because on the one hand, they celebrate our differences, but on the other hand, through the stories, you get the universal thing. You see the commonalities. So they really address a lot of the aspects of humanity. So, I mean, this is another thing that I became passionate about, this whole thing about telling stories and preventing us from losing our humanity. And with Desmond Tutu dying, the social media was flooded with quotes. And one thing that he said was something along the lines of, you become a person when you recognize the person in other people. Yeah. So humanity is not just yours. Humanity must come from both sides or all sides before it can be. I forget the actual quote, but it's something along those lines.
That's a profound statement, because that's the podcast, exactly what's happened in the podcast. I've interviewed 170 or 180 people now, and I've never spoken about politics and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and the Australian version of all of that junk. I've never done any of that stuff, right? All we've ever spoken to is what life was like before stroke, what life is like with stroke, and what it's like after stroke, or when certain number of years have elapsed and they're still, like me, living with what it's done, but also have moved beyond it somewhat. And everyone is exactly the same. Everyone wants to be well. They want to have a roof over their head. They want to be fed. They want to be loved. They want to be nurtured. They want to express themselves. They want to have people together around them, community. They want to have all these things that are exactly the same, and all the other junk goes away. The politics goes away, all the other rubbish, the religion goes away, everything goes away. Get rid of all of that junk, and then everyone is the same underneath. That's what and the people I've interviewed are from a lot of backgrounds, diverse backgrounds in every way, shape or form, people that I would never interact with here. I would never, for example, interact with in Australia with people from Mexico or people from, I don't know where, it doesn't matter where, because I'm too far away from them, because I live in Australia and they live over there. Now I'm interacting with them and I'm getting this really rich tapestry of life experience and beliefs and understandings and all that type of thing. But then once they all go away, the story underneath is all the same story.
Right.
And everybody desires for the same things. They just get caught up in, what other people want us to get caught up in, like whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, whether you're a vaxxer or an
Right.
anti-vaxxer, and all that junk, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the podcast has done. Exactly what you just described. It's created this opportunity for me to see the people, and therefore, when I see somebody homeless in our city down the road, it doesn't mean anything to me. And I'll go up and I'll talk to that person. Hey, how you going? How's things? What's happening? And we did that with my wife a couple of weeks ago, which just before Christmas. It just sort of started with, I saw a guy lying down, and he wasn't sitting like a regular homeless person. He didn't have a container or a board asking for money or anything like that. He was just lying down in this awkward way and I walked past him initially thinking that he was sleeping, and I didn't want to disturb him. Sometimes they'll do that during the day. And then I said to my wife, hang on a sec, he might be having a stroke. Let me go back and just check up on him and make sure he's not having a stroke.
Yeah.
And then I went there and I said, mate, are you okay? And he said, oh, sorry, man. I'm just, I just needed to lie down, whatever. No, don't apologize. I thought maybe you were unwell. And then we had this conversation, and that led to, he's been out of prison a short amount of time, and he hasn't got enough money for a phone call. And he needed some money for a phone call. And then I said to him, when was the last time you ate? And he said, I ate 3 days ago. And I said, well, let's go and get something to eat. And it just created this conversation as if he was a friend of mine, and I was treating him for lunch. That was something that I do all the time. And that's how the conversation went. And that was not me before the stroke. And I'm not saying that to brag about how I help homeless people.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I don't really, but I just realized that the guy lying down with his hands on his head could be unwell, and I should be curious about that and find out if he needs help. And the help that he needed was a warm meal, and he actually needed a haircut. He didn't look too scruffy, but he goes, man, I need a haircut. I said to him, sweet, let's go and get you a $20 haircut from the lady that's just down the road there. And he agreed, and he came along, and we got to know each other, and he told me his story. And the story was the same story that the stroke survivors tell me.
Interesting thing, you know that 80% of the prison population are brain injury survivors?
I do. Yeah.
No, mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And mind-boggling and very disturbing.
Very disturbing, because it makes sense that, people don't know, sometimes aren't able to interact in a way that's going to be useful or non-confronting, or whatever, and they don't know how to not do that because their brain doesn't work properly. I totally get that, because that can be me from time to time. I've never.
It's also the rage issues, the disinhibition, the lack of control.
Yeah.
No,
I completely get it. Deb, I really have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story, and I look forward to interacting with you on Instagram and getting to know you more. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a really profound conversation.
No, thank you. No, I enjoyed it very much too. As you said, you make interesting connections. I've made connections all over the world through this. It's fantastic.
I've never met a maths professor, and now I can say that I have.
Not anymore.
If I have a maths conundrum, I definitely am going to let you know.
Yeah, math emergencies, that's me.
Well, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And I would like to ask you if it's possible to leave the show a 5-star review on either iTunes or the podcast app that you use to listen to podcasts. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, also give the show a thumbs up and leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of the particular episode. Doing this is going to make a big difference to how search engines rank the podcast. And if they rank it well, that might make it easier for other stroke survivors who are going through something similar to what we have been through to find the podcast, and that might make it better for them in their path to recovery. So thanks so much for doing that. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.